Hello, I'm Jose, and welcome back to In Response EDH. Comment below who you think will win this week's episode. I'm playing my Xenagos God of Rebels deck, and I keep a hand with Atali Primal Storm, Rurik Thar the Unbound, Dragon Lord Atarka, Cultivate, Exotic Orchard, Cinderglade, and a Mountain. Derek brought his 5-color Sisay Weatherlight Captain deck. His 7 cards are Massacre Girl, Muldrotha the Gravetide, Dovin's Veto, Wayfarer's Bauble, Hero's Blade, Command Tower, and the World Tree. Albert is playing his Gishath Dinosaur Tribal deck, keeping a Drover of the Mighty, Knight of the Stampede, Territorial Allosaurus, Quartzwood Crasher, Windswept Heath, Sunbait Canyon, and a Plains. Daniel brought his mono-white Avacyn Angel of Hope deck. His hand is Standard Bearer, Linvala Keeper of Silence, Mesa Enchantress, Idyllic Tutor, Ancient Tomb, Homeward Path, and a Snow-Covered Plains. Enjoy the episode. I'm starting off this game by drawing a card, playing a Cinderglade onto the battlefield tapped as my land, and then I pass the turn over. Derek is next, and he plays the World Tree as his land, and with nothing else, he passes the turn. Up next we have Albert, who plays a Windswept Heath at his land per turn, sacrifices it, and searches out a Temple Garden tapped onto the battlefield. And with nothing else, he passes. Going last today we have Daniel, who after he draws his card, plays an Ancient Tomb for his land, and passes his turn. Looks like round 1 is nothing but fair magic. After I untap, I draw my card, play a Exotic Orchard as my land, tap all my mana to play a Vivian Arcbow, and then I ship the turn over. Derek draws his card, plays a Command Tower, and then plays a Hero's Blade, and then passes to Albert. Albert then draws his card, plays a basic Plains onto the battlefield, and taps everything for a Drover of the Mighty, then ships the turn over. Even though Daniel is going last, having the Ancient Tomb turn 1 gives him a little edge above everybody else. After he draws, he plays a Snow-Covered Plains, taps all his mana, losing 2 life, to cast a Idyllic Tutor. He searches for the best mono white card, Smothering Tithe, and puts it into his hand, and passes his turn. Turn 3 starts off with me untapping, drawing a card, playing a basic mountain onto the battlefield, then tapping for a Cultivate, searching for a mountain onto the battlefield tapped, and a forest to my hand. With nothing else, I pass over to Derek. Derek draws his card for his turn, untaps his mana, then decides to play a Watery Grave untapped, losing 2 life. He forgets to take the damage, but it doesn't change the outcome of the game. He then taps a mana to play a Wayfarer's Bauble, and with nothing else, he decides to pass the turn over to Albert. Albert untaps, draws his card, and then plays a Sunbait Canyon onto the battlefield. He taps his entire board to produce 4 mana, losing 1 life off the Sunbait Canyon to play Knight of the Stampede. Then he ends his turn. Daniel draws his card, then goes to play a Homeward Path for his land this turn, and then attempts to cast his Smothering Tithe. Derek quickly responds with a Dovin's Veto, countering the Smothering Tithe. Not having anything else to do, Daniel's forced to pass his turn. For being turn 4, nothing too crazy is out there yet. So after I draw my card and untap, I decide to play Carplusian Forest as my land per turn, and then tap everything out for a Guardian Project, setting up for future turns. Derek draws, untaps, and plays one of the best mana rocks we've seen in recent years, Arcane Signet. He then uses the Signet and another land to sacrifice a Wayfarer's Bauble to search for basic plains to put onto the battlefield tapped. Then passes his turn. Albert takes his turn, untaps, draws his card, taps his Sunbaked Canyon, losing another life, and 2 other mana to play Quartzwood Crasher. He then follows that up by playing a Temple of Triumph, scrying 1 card and leaving it on top. Daniel untaps, rearranges his lands, plays a basic plains for his land, then plays a free Jeweled Lotus, taps everything, sacrificing the Lotus to play his commander, Avacyn, Angel of Hope, which makes all his permanents indestructible. Hopefully he doesn't board wipe while that's still on the field. I start by untapping, drawing a card, and thinking it's time to get something on the field, so I play a basic forest, and then I tap everything to play a Rurik Thar, the Unbound. When he enters the battlefield, it triggers my Guardian project, which allows me to draw 1 card. Derek is up next, and on his turn, he untaps, draws his first card for his turn. Then he decides to go and play his commander, Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. Because Sisay enters the battlefield, it triggers a Hero's Blade and gets attached. He then passes his turn over. Albert untaps, draws his card, and the first thing he does is to play a tapped Cinderglade. He then moves his creature from his land side back up to the field so he can tell the difference that it's a creature and not a land. He then goes to combat and swings at Derek with his Quartzwood Crasher. Derek takes the damage and goes down to 32. Albert then creates a 6/6 dinosaur token with trample because of the Quartzwood Crasher. On his second main phase, he taps 3 mana to play a Rhythm of the Wild. And then with that, he ends his turn. Daniel untaps, draws his card, and just loves paying 2 life to activate his Ancient Tomb. He then also taps 2 white mana to play Linvala, Keeper of Silence. He goes to combat and decides to swing Avacyn at me. I don't want to lose my Rurik Thar, so I just take the 8 damage. Daniel then passes his turn over to me. On my turn, I untap, draw my card. Liking what it is, I immediately tap out to play See the Unwritten with Ferocious, so it allows me to get 2 creature cards from the top 8 and put them onto the battlefield. Unfortunately, there's only 1 card, and it's a Vigor. The rest of my cards that I saw have to go to the graveyard. Oh well, Vigor's good enough to have on the field. I go to combat, and Rurik Thar has to attack every turn. While having a Vigor out on the field, it's really good, so I decide to attack Derek. He decides to take it, and he loses 6 life. I then pass it over to him. Derek untaps, draws his card, then does nothing. Passes through his phases, leaving all his mana open, and ships the turn over to Albert. Albert untaps and draws. He then immediately goes to combat and attacks me for 6. Unfortunately, I forgot that Rurik Thar has Vigilance, and I take the 6. Doesn't really change the outcome of the game, I don't think, but hey, reading the card explains the card. He then creates another 6/6 trample dinosaur token. On his second main phase, he decides to play Kinjali Sunwing. In response, Derek taps 5 mana to play his Sarak the Huntcaller, so it won't be tapped down. Albert then finishes his turn. Daniel untaps, draws, plays a Plains, and then doesn't want to deal with Albert's commander, so he plays Nevermore. He then also plays Standard Bearer. He then goes to combat and swings Avacyn at Albert, who takes the 8 damage. He then passes the turn. On my turn, after I untap and draw, I decide to just go into combat and then swing my Ruik Thar at Daniel. He doesn't block and takes a 6 damage. On my second main phase, I play a Kodama's Reach, taking 6 damage from my Ruik Thar, and I search out a forest in the field and a forest in the hand. I then play the forest for my land. I then tap 4 mana to play Naith of the Dire Hunt. I then draw my card and pass the turn over. On Derek's turn, after he untaps and draws a card, he taps all his mana to play Mirari's Wake, which activates Ruik Thar and makes him lose 6 life. Albert is up next, who untaps, then draws a card. Then decides to play a Sword of the Animist. Ruik Thar triggers, and he also loses 6 life. After that, he attaches it to one of his dinosaur tokens. He then goes to combat and attacks Derek with his equipped dinosaur token. The sword triggers and he gets a basic mountain onto the battlefield tapped. Not realizing how strong Sisay was, Derek decides to block and kill the token. With nothing else, Albert passes his turn. Daniel's next, and he untaps, draws a card. He then taps his Ancient Tomb, and then realizes he doesn't need to, so untaps it. Taps 4 mana to play Day of Judgment, destroying all creatures on the battlefield. He loses 6 life for casting a non-creature spell. Derek, in response, has the answer once again to save us, and uses Fierce Guardianship to counter that spell. But he does lose 6 life because of the Ruik Thar. Daniel, not liking that his spell was countered, goes to combat and attacks Derek with his Avacyn. Derek can't block and loses 8 more life, and with nothing else, passes it over to me. On my turn, I untap, draw a card, in my main phase, I play a Kessig Wolf Run for my land, and then I go to combat. At the beginning of combat, I activate Neith. To double the power of Vigor, making it a 12/12. I send the Ruik Thar at Daniel and the Vigor at Albert. Daniel naturally blocks the Ruik Thar because it doesn't have trample, so no damage gets dealt to him. Albert offers up a trade, and I don't think that's good enough. So before damage, I Blood Rush Gore Clan Rampager to give Vigor a +4/+4 trample. So I kill both Albert's creatures. On my second main phase, I tap 3 mana to play Fierce Empath, which when it enters, I draw a card, and I search my library for a creature that has 6 or more CMC. I suspend a Search for Tomorrow so I can just finish my turn quicker and go searching for a Thorn Mammoth, and I put it into my hand, ending my turn. Derek untaps, draws, gets greedy, and plays an untapped Overgrown Tomb, taking 2 life. He then fully taps out to play Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, which when he enters, draws him 4 cards. It enters tapped, and then he passes his turn. Albert untaps, draws, on his first main phase, plays a Command Beacon. He then taps enough mana to play Zatalpa, Primal Dawn. Daniel untaps, draws, he goes to combat and contemplates who he wants to attack. In the end, he decides to attack Derek, taking him out of the game. Then, on his second main phase, he taps enough to play Akroma, Angel of Wrath. With nothing else, he passes it over to me. This is not looking good for me, so I'm hoping I top deck something nice. I untap, draw a card, I take a counter off of the suspended Search for Tomorrow. I go to combat, and at the beginning of combat, again, I activate Nayith, targeting the Vigor, and I swing the Vigor at Albert. And I forget that Rurikthar has to attack this turn. I messed up. Would it have changed the outcome of the game? Who knows? Albert, failing to double block last time, decides so this time he's going to triple block it to make sure the Vigor dies. Not wanting to lose my Vigor, I Kesset Wolf Run for 2, targeting the Vigor. But Daniel then activates his Standard Bearer, changing the target from Vigor to Standard Bearer. In the end, I do lose Vigor, and Albert loses 2 creatures. I then pass the turn. Albert untaps, draws, then during his main phase 1, casts a Territorial Allosaurus. When it enters, he decides to give it haste with the Rhythm of the Wild. He also equips his Sword of the Animist to his Zatalpa. He then goes to combat and swings all 3 creatures at me. I block what I can, but still end up losing 8 life. Albert then ends his turn. Daniel's up next, and he untaps and draws. Not having to do anything on his first main phase, he decides to skip it and go straight into combat. Taking me out seems like a good opportunity that he can't miss up. So he sends both creatures my way to make sure I am fully taken out. Then, on his second main phase, he plays Mesa Enchantress. With nothing else to do, he passes the turn over to Albert. Albert untaps, draws. First thing he does is tap a mana to play Soul Ring. He then fully taps out to play Finale of Devastation for 6. Daniel tells Albert to slow his roll as he has a response for it. In response, Daniel plays Lapse of Certainty, which counters Albert's spell and puts it on top of his library. Albert then goes to combat and swings everything at Daniel. Daniel wants to make sure he blocks as much damage as he could, so he shows exactly how he wants to block. Having Indestructible helps, he's able to kill one of Albert's creatures. Albert then ends his turn, passing it over to Daniel. Daniel untaps, draws, and once again goes right into combat, swinging all his creatures at Albert, hoping he has enough to close out this game. Unfortunately, Albert has one indestructible creature up and blocks Avacyn, bringing Albert down to 2 life. It's super close and very suspenseful at this point. Can Albert's card on top find him the win? Not seeing anything else he can do on his turn, Daniel decides to pass the turn over to Albert. Albert then untaps, draws his Finale of Devastation, casts it for 6, and then finds Aurelia, the War Leader, which is exactly the card he needed to have another combat phase to close out this game. Wow, that was an incredible way to finish the game. Congratulations, Albert, for clutching the win at the end. Did you guess correctly on who was going to win this game? If you did, let us know in the comment section down below. Just want to say thank you for joining us this week, and we hope you liked the gameplay. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on all our social medias. Watch last week's video if you still haven't, and we hope you have a great rest of the week.